Welcome to the Masculinity Unmasked podcast with hosts Greg Stein, Max Wilson, and Linda Tilson.
Okay, hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Masculinity Unmasked podcast, the fortnightly conversation which delves deep into the issues impacting men today. We're here to have the conversations you might not be having elsewhere, honest, open, sometimes uncomfortable, but always important. So the title for today's episode is Beyond the Closet, Living, Working and Thriving as GBT plus men. And I'm very lucky to be joined today by Christian Chalfont, who is a coach and counsellor, works with men, and also my co-host, Linda Tilson, who is joining this conversation as an interested ally, which we really appreciate. So, Christian, just to start off with, thanks very much for joining us today. Do you want to start by sharing a little bit about who you are and the sort of work that you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. So I've been working as a counsellor and psychotherapist based in Manchester, England for about the past 4 or 5 years now. My work focuses quite heavily on issues around trauma, addiction, sex and sexuality. And just naturally, when I went into private practice, men really started kind of seeking me out and wanting to work with me. So when I was actually doing my counselling training, I was working with about 95% women. And then as soon as I transitioned into private practice, that ratio completely flipped on its head to become about 95% men now.
Interesting. Okay. So it sort of happened naturally to you in a way.
Yeah, completely naturally.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really interested to hear about sort of all your work in that space, and we'll definitely come on to all of that. The topic for this episode is about living, working, thriving as LGBT plus men, so myself included. So speaking to specifically gay, bi, trans plus men, and their journeys and their experiences. And as men who are part of the LGBT plus community, I thought it'd be a good idea to sort of start with that part of the conversation, sort of our own journeys of coming to terms with our identities in the community. And for those who are listening who, maybe straight, for example, might not understand that process, what that's like, I think that this could be a really illuminating part of the conversation as well. So, I don't know if we've shared too much about our respective stories. I think we sort of dabbled in it, haven't we? But I'd love to hear more, about your journey, if you're happy to share.
Yeah, 100%. So just to give some context, I'm 42 years old now, but I first came out when I was 12 years old in high school. So at the time, I was being bullied just by one guy in particular of the same age, just constantly calling me derogatory names like gay, puff, faggot, and things like that. And yeah, it was just quite overwhelming. That transition from going from primary school into high school, I found it quite jarring and quite difficult. Didn't really know who I was, didn't really have a great sense of self or identity. Usually felt more comfortable around adults. Don't know why, didn't really feel comfortable with my own peer group, but then never really felt like I fit in with guys or boys or was ever really interested in sports or things like that. So I think there was multiple things there that kind of kept me on the outside of those kind of cliques and friendship groups. And I think it was obvious to some of the people that I probably was gay at that time, and they kind of focused on that. And just it was really hard. It's hard to navigate that. I remember feeling very ostracized and feeling quite depressed. And there being multiple times where I just wished I was dead. I just didn't want to be here.
Yeah, so sad. And thank you for sharing that. And that's the experience of so many of us. I'm curious to hear, Linda, hearing that as a parent of, you've got a son, don't you, for example? But just as a parent generally, how is it to hear that that's the experience of someone in the community growing up?
Well, it definitely tears in my heart. And it's interesting that you asked me that question because I have a daughter and 2 sons. And actually, my daughter has a whole handful of gay men that she is friends with. And so people coming over to our house to hang out, I've had exposure to the coming out for a while. And I was actually asked by my daughter to have the conversation if
Oh, wow.
her friend wanted it with his parents. Didn't need to do that. It happened organically on its own, but I was prepared to do that. So we've always been a household that's been a safe place for anyone, really, but even for gay boys to be in our presence. I've had gay and transgender friends as well. I'm just all about, being there for people in general, being a kind, good person. And so for me, this is natural. It's totally natural. It's needed. I actually very happy that we're having this conversation today because I felt like on the Masculinity Unmasked podcast, we needed to cover this space. And so I'm very happy that we are. We've been probably having a lot of straight or women or other people on the podcast. And so I wanted to see more of this conversation happening, especially as we're going into International Men's Day, especially all men.
Yeah, yeah. So important, and it was having that conversation, wasn't it, that prompted this from yourselves. Really, really great to have you here. And I wish I had a Linda when I was growing up. I think we all wish we had a Linda. So your 12-year-old self, Christian, how do we get from 12-year-old Christian to 42-year-old Christian who's got practice that's now helping other men, other queer men? Like, what did that journey look like for you, that transition over time?
Crazy. It was an absolute roller coaster. It really, really was. If I may speak to one point, though, I was really fortunate whereby my best friend in high school, a girl called Lisa, she ended up telling her mother that I was gay and that I was struggling at school because I was really struggling at one point. And I wasn't telling my own family anything that happened for fear of what those conversations would look like. And her mum came and sat me down one day when I was around at their house and said, listen, Lisa's told me that you're gay. I want you to know that I'm not going to tell your mum. And I was freaking out, completely freaking out at the time that her mum knew. I said, it's okay. I said, I'm not going to tell anyone, but you can ask me any question. I've got gay friends. If you need an introduction to somebody, if you need like a helpline, she said, I'm always here for you and I'm not going to out you in any way. And that managed to calm me down and give me one point of reference for one adult of safety that I could contact. And that was actually huge. So yeah, really appreciate those people like yourself, Linda, and those other parents and adults that are out there who do create that safety for individuals as they're transitioning in that journey. But that whole kind of roller coaster of where I've got to today, for a long time, it took me what felt like forever just to figure out who I was, just to understand a sense of self, a sense of identity. I had such a low sense of self-worth that followed me throughout most of my adult life. So as well as being bullied for being gay at school, I was really bullied by teachers as well for being dyslexic. One teacher in particular was really brutal, and she was with other people in the school as well in different ways. But I was just taught to believe that I was just stupid, I wasn't intelligent, and that I should just go and work in a shop. So for a large portion of my life, I just didn't believe I belonged in other spaces, or that I should have an opinion, or that I should voice anything out in public for fear of how that would be perceived. So for most of my adult life, I changed careers roughly every 4 years and would change jobs or where I was working every 1 to 2 years. So I've probably had about 5 or 6 different professions, from the age of like 15 up to my mid 30s. And it was in round about the age of 35, 36 that I took some real time out to consider who I was, what I wanted, and what I had to offer the world. And a friend of mine had been telling me for about 2 years that he thought I should go into psychotherapy and look into becoming a counselor. Because one thing that's been a real constant throughout all of my life has been people opening up to me in major ways, literally within a day of meeting me. And I don't know why. I don't know what it is that people feel or what they see or what they experience, but it's honestly bonkers how some people have told me the most confronting thing that you can tell somebody, and then a couple of seconds after they've exposed themselves or been vulnerable, you see them start to freak out, and I'm just like, just pause for a minute. I said, I'm not going to tell a single person what you've told me. I said, there was obviously some reason that you felt you could say that, and that's what needed to happen. And that's okay, I can hold that. So recognizing my friend, seeing this in our relationship and what he's seen of our conversations that we've had over the years and how I've held those conversations. At this point, when I finally started looking into becoming a counselor, I was apprehensive because I do feel things quite deeply. And I always thought that I'd want to rescue people. And I wasn't sure if I could have boundaries. So that's why I put it off for 2 years. But when I finally came to look at it, I started that process and absolutely loved it. And it really taught me a lot about myself. There was a lot of deep developmental work internally that I went through, and it helps me learn how to have boundaries and how to understand what self-care is without it being something which is selfish or arrogant. It really taught me, actually, this is what it means to have self-care. This is what boundaries look like, and this is the purpose that they serve.
Yeah. Wow. So much in that on different levels. And, you started by talking about the impact that not only being queer had on you, but also the dyslexia. and the messaging around the dyslexia. And I just want to speak to that for a moment, because we can't teach our children to be gay. We can't teach our children to be undyslexic, but we can teach our children to hate themselves.
Yeah.
And that's the real problem with the system. That's the real problem with a lot of parenting at the moment, is this real drive to change somebody at their fundamental core. And the damage that had on you, just showing that in your story with the career shifts and all of that. I'm not even talking about sexuality there. I'm sure that played a part, but that's huge.
Yeah.
And I see it in my own journey as well. Like being a lawyer, I masked up heavily because I felt like I didn't fit into that world, but I massively tried to hide my sexuality as well in that space. And it comes back to a point you were saying, I'm not self-worth, I'm not enough. And that's the messaging that a lot of us GBT plus guys are given and carry through into our lives for a very long time, until we do some of that inner work.
Yeah.
I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, worthy enough. And it's only really recently for me that I've got to a point where I think, actually, I am enough. I can come out in the barbers, I can come out in a taxi. And this is what people don't realize, is that it's a daily coming out. It's not just a once-off thing. It's the thing we have to do. What were you up to the weekend? I was with my insert here, partner, husband, whatever that might be, right? It is a real journey, that. And before we sort of get onto the gift part that you have around the work that you do, which is amazing, I'd love to just hear about how you've got to that place of self-worth, enoughness, working through the shame side of things, whatever you're comfortable speaking to.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, one thing that really comes out in just memory as we're going through this stuff is, not only did I not feel a sense of belonging, I should say, in like school or with adults and teachers. As soon as I started going into queer spaces, like into the queer community in Manchester, and trying to get into pubs and clubs and bars at the age of 15, which is ridiculous looking back on that now. But the bouncers wouldn't let me in there either. So they say, oh no, we don't allow straight guys in here. And I'm like, oh, but I'm not straight, I'm gay. They're like, yeah, no, you're not. Fuck off.
Right.
So because I presented in such a way, they wouldn't allow me into those spaces. So no matter where I went, I wasn't acceptable. So trying to have a sense of tribe or community or identity, nothing was available to me for what felt like a very long time. And that was, again, difficult. It's just another layer on top of all those things. Can you just re-ask your question again? It just slipped out of my mind.
Yeah. So it was about your journey with I am enough, self-worth, the shame stuff. I think you were sort of talking about you don't fit in anywhere, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thinking about the different careers that I've had over the years and what those conversations look like of, oh, do you have a girlfriend, or are you married, or those types of questions when they come up, I'd usually just be like, oh no, I'd just try and answer it as succinctly, but close it down quite quickly, just like it wasn't on my radar. I just liked being free and single and doing other things. But then seeing that people would kind of guess, and what did they do with that information? If it was guys that they felt threatened by it, would they kind of use it as a weapon, or would there be some microaggressions in the stuff that they say or do, or a look, or a challenge in a stare, where they'd say something which was controversial or bigoted, and they'd wait for a response where they're just kind of probing or prodding and just saying, oh, kind of wind this person up, or kind of get them to flip, or kind of get them to have a reaction. So that was, I was dealing with those things, as everybody does, in some relation in their lives, probably up until about mid-20s. But something really interesting happened when I was about 26, 27. I actually met a girl on a climbing holiday through a mutual group of friends, and actually found myself attracted to her. And that was a whole journey then, after only ever identifying as gay previous to that, to all of a sudden being attracted to the opposite sex, and then having to go through that journey. And I was actually with that lady for about a year and a half.
Wow.
And we actually explored what that would be like together. Ultimately, I ended the relationship realizing that I would want to be with a man again. But that was an entire journey of having a first time all over again at the age of 26, 27, and recognizing what my first time was like at the age of 16, and how wildly different those two journeys were, and what an absolute gift it was to have it again at the age of 26, 27. With somebody who was, again, a few years older than me, but being able to communicate and articulate in a very mature adult way, and how we navigated that process together. So learning what it was like to go through that situation again in a different way allowed me to develop a greater sense of self, a great sense of identity. And it was really interesting seeing how I felt more manly being with a woman at the time, and what elements of my own personality that cultivated and allowed me to feel into and develop as a human being, regardless of being gay, straight, or anything else. And then again, the development into my it's just slowly started to develop my relationships with men more, and not to do any disservice to any male friendships that I had before that point, because I've been very lucky in most of my friendships that I've had. But recognizing when I started to do the counseling and personal development, the types of men that I came into contact with and the models of masculinity that I was exposed to felt wildly different to anything that had happened before. And that allowed a real deepening of relationship with other men that I hadn't previously felt was available to me.
So much in there I want to ask you questions on. I want to come to Linda and just check in with you, Linda. Again, sort of sitting in the seat as an ally, hearing these journeys that we go through around the worth piece and all of that, and everything that Christian's just shared. What's coming up for you? Any thoughts, questions around this?
Actually, a thought that has come up with me, especially during our conversation here, is that society-wise, we tend to draw the line in the sand between, gay and straight, and we forget to recognize that that's only one tiny sliver of who we are, our sexuality, our preferences, that we're this, this human, this person that has all of these needs and feelings and journeys and expectations and experiences. And so, as an ally gravitating towards the sexuality, I think we should gravitate towards the whole person, who they are and what they need to feel community, to feel supported as a person. End of
Yep.
story. That's what I have to say about that. Do you guys agree? I mean, that we should change the focus and move away. I mean, not to not recognize sexuality, but it's not the only defining thing as humans that we have.
Christian?
Yeah, 100%. When I was a teenager, recognizing that I was gay and defining it as coming to terms with, because I felt like it was a death sentence and I thought I would die alone, with my concept of what it meant to be gay at that age. And then kind of going through the teenage years and thinking, well, at least I'm not bi, because that'd be really confusing. And trans wasn't on my radar back then. Not that applied to me in my identity or my journey. But then meeting a woman in my late 20s, then experiencing all this level of attraction or desire or love for the opposite sex, and then how that affected my process and my identity. So I've got a partner now who I've been with for almost 10 years, and his name is Jack. And it depends on the day of the week. When somebody says, oh, are you gay? Are you bi? Are you pansexual? And it's like, I find it a difficult question to answer. It's just like, why does it matter? And like, I've been with my partner for 10 years, I can recognize sometimes that I might be attracted to somebody else of the opposite sex, or it might end up being that I was attracted to somebody who was trans. It's like, for me, it's a spectrum. It's about the individual. It's about the connection. It's about the authenticity. It's about, as human beings, what do we give each other permission to be? Or how do we limit each other? And how do we limit ourselves? And how are we limited by religion, society, culture, family, and the things that we've been exposed to? And where is the possibility for change in that?
Let's write that down, because I love that. As human beings, what do we give each other permission to be? And I think that's what it boils down to, linking it back to Linda's question, is that so many of us aren't given permission to just be. So we have to fit into these labels and we have to contort ourselves. And I had long-term girlfriends before I came out as gay, and I was like, well, I'm not gay, but I'm not bi, but I'm not this, I'm not that. And just the mental anguish to try and present myself into the world in some way that made sense.
Yeah.
I knew who I was and what I was, but I had to contort that into language. And that's what we're talking about, right? Linguistic constructs that are palatable and make sense to others. That's the only reason why we have these labels. People are like, oh, there's so many letters in the alphabet, we keep adding to them. Yeah, because we're trying to explain ourselves more clearly. It's not as simple as what people want, right? And that's speaking from that space of privilege. But yeah, it'd be great if we lived in that world where we didn't have to do any of this. And I think there are some spaces in the world where we don't, where we can just be. People don't ask these questions so much.
Yeah.
Certainly kids, generations growing up now, things are getting better, not politically in the world, but on the ground amongst children. The conversations they're having around these things are better, but there's still a lot more to be done. So the work that you do now, you work with quite a lot of queer men, and I use queer as that umbrella term for GBT plus men. What are some of the common challenges that you see in that space when you're doing that work?
Sure. It's really interesting. I work with a real broad spectrum of demographics under the queer umbrella. So I work with men who identify as gay or bi or pansexual. I work with male sex workers. And I work with individuals who are trans, whether that's trans male, trans female, and people who have detransitioned as well. When they've gone down the pathway, realize actually this either wasn't the right route for me, or it's been so utterly traumatic and isolating that they've decided to detransition. And then just the pain of that, just the pain of how that is received in society or within a queer community, to have been somebody who first transitioned and then had the audacity to detransition. That being the perception that they had the audacity to all of a sudden go on this massive journey of self-discovery and then be even more ostracized and vilified for doing what was best for them, and supporting people through that. And another thing which I see quite a lot of is quote unquote straight men who want to explore their sexuality and their identity, but they're in heteronormative relationships, whether that's as partners, married with children, and again, at all age spectrums as well. So from I only work with adults, I don't work with children, so 18 plus. But, I work with men in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s who've come out at later stages in their life, whether they've told their wives and partners or whether, there's been a major life event that's changed their circumstances, which has allowed them to come out at a later part in their life and then explore that side of their identity.
Yeah. Becoming more and more common, that exploration, isn't it? Which is, it's sad really, isn't it? If you think about the life that's come before and everyone involved in that and the deconstruction.
Yeah. And especially just the trauma that's involved in that as well. I work with individuals who've been through, what's the word? Conversion therapy.
Wow.
So I work with clients who've been exposed to conversion therapy for years on end, been in and out of those programs and have come out the other side of them and are really trying to heal from that and develop a sense of self-worth and try and process and move on from that self-hatred that's been instilled in them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, again, a huge problem in the community, religion being used as an excuse to basically cause real harm to individuals. You've spoken to lots of different areas there, and we could unpack in each and every one of those. Are really interesting. I would like to just ask you, Linda, sort of as an ally, listening to all of that, listening to all that pain or that traumatic process that people go through. What you're a very active ally, and you showed up here today. What do you feel that allies could be doing better to support the community, the LGBT plus community?
Well, I think what they could be doing better is getting a real understanding of what the community needs from allies, like actually asking and then listening to what that is, and then seeing where there's common agreement, where there can be support. Because I think it's one thing to say an ally and we show up and we do what we think is needed and wanted, to find out maybe that's not what we wanted. Because I do know too there's protected spaces where maybe allies wouldn't come into to protect the safety and the vulnerability of the group. And maybe there's a time and a place where someone like myself could come in and be of support, one-on-one or group or otherwise. Just knowing to, ask first before coming in and doing something, to honor and respect people's privacy, their wishes, and what they really need to receive to feel supported. So being involved in the conversation to really truly understand that, because what we don't want to do is to come in and, be more harmful than helpful.
Yeah. I think that's spot on. I really do. Simply asking the question and giving somebody autonomy. As you were saying that, Linda, something that came into my mind is this idea of transference that happens in counseling. So sometimes when a client comes into a session, it's interesting to think, why has a client chosen to work with me? Because most people tell me that I'm quite straight presenting, quite masculine presenting. So why does any client come to work with me? Is it because I remind them of a father, a brother, a son? Is it because they wish to look like me? Because I present as a certain type of male? Is it because they're trying to move away from that? Is it because I look like somebody who's abused them or tortured them in some way and they're trying to reconcile that? So recognizing, I wonder what transferences some of your daughter's friends have in relation to you, Linda, as a mother, as a woman of safety, as their own parents or families not being places of safety, but you modeling something of safety and emotional regulation for them that allows them to feel loved and feel seen. And that is so powerful. And simply allowing them to have a sense of self and a voice and say, I hear you, I see you and it's all right. I accept you. And it doesn't matter who you are or what what you feel. It's like, that's normal. And I say that to people all the time. It's like, that's normal. There's nothing wrong with you. Not to diminish what they're going through, but just to say, this is so common. You're not alone in what you're feeling.
Thank you for putting it that way, because you just described or mirrored back what these individuals that are welcome in our home. And, I support them also as that, I guess, I'm that real life ally. I'm not just a label. I'm a real person that's caring and loving and kind. And I can sit down and talk with them about anything, and they know they're accepted. And I'm just like going through like things in my mind right now where there's been sensitive moments, and their sexuality didn't like become this divided thing, or this thing that's like, how do I put this? It wasn't the thing. It was just the humanness in the situation. And they know that. They know that they can call me, come to me, ask for help and support in anything really. And so why did they do that? Well, because I have a nurturing energy. I always have since I've been 12. I will help people to have that voice or have that space to have that expression. And it's just natural to me. And so I'm just glad that I can be that support in that way.
Yeah, 100%. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there as well. It's like, it's that felt sense, and you get it in counseling and you get it in rapport building with clients, whether you're a coach or a counselor or whoever. It's what you feel. A baby can't intellectualize how a parent makes it feel. It either feels safe or it doesn't. And that comes energetically in our body behavior, in our language, in our tonality, in the level of touch that we give. And those are all applicable to all of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we could have a whole conversation just on that, couldn't we? Because you started talking about that earlier, Christian, as well, that vibe, that gift that you have, and Lindy's alluded to that as well. So I'm conscious of time, and what I'd love to leave the listeners with is a takeaway. And what I'm thinking of is somebody who's maybe got curious around the title of this podcast episode because they are maybe exploring their sexuality for the first time, or somebody who's closeted still and is listening to this. What takeaways would you give them? We're thinking about it through that lens of thriving, which is what this podcast is all about. How to help somebody thrive in this space, how to get them to the space where they're thriving. Where can they start? So I'll be really interested to hear it from your perspective, Christian, as a LGBT plus guy and counsellor, and your perspective, Linda, as this fantastic ally who's done so much work, with your kids and people around in their networks. What would you say to this person that's listening?
So reaching out to something that feels safe, is there a person of safety? Is that an adult? Is it a friend? Is it somebody that you admire in the way that they conduct themselves? Is it a charitable foundation like the LGBT Foundation, recognizing resources that they might have to be able to signpost individuals? And thinking about things like counseling and therapy, what that can afford somebody. But again, things like finances can be a limiting factor there. So recognizing again that the LGBT Foundation might be able to signpost or direct people to free services where finances aren't a limiting factor.
Right. Great tips there. Cheers for that, Christian. Linda?
Yes, I would say that I agree with Christian. Do find someone that you can talk to that you feel comfortable and safe with. And just know that chances are, if you open up in that protected space, there's probably someone else that could use that too. So just, finding groups of communities of people going through something similar is helpful. You never know when you open up in that safe space that someone like myself could connect you to someone or a group of people that you could be with and have that safe space. Because I do that all the time. I will recommend groups and practitioners, coaches that people could have those conversations with, in addition to what I will listen to and sit beside somebody.
Yeah. It's a great point. And I just add there, I volunteer, run something called the Rainbow Coaching Collective, which is online circles for the community, LGBT plus communities. It's a space. Linda was talking about group spaces. It's a space to come
And those group spaces are amazing, to actually have that sense of tribe, that sense of community where somebody can be welcome and feel a sense of belonging is huge.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this is a huge topic. We could spend another 2 hours talking about this, and it's so great to launch into it with you both. Thanks so much for your time, Christian. Thanks for bothering to come along, Linda, today. It's been really great to get stuck in. If people want to get in contact with you, Christian, do some work with you, I know that we haven't talked really to the coaching side. You can speak a little bit about that now if you want to, but what's the best way of getting in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. So we've got my personal website, which is just christianchalfont.com. And then the coaching website is called Core 5 Coaching. So either of those, you'd be able to find me. Literally, if you just type my name into Google, I'm the first person that comes up. But if somebody doesn't know where to begin, they can contact me through the website, and I can always give them some signposting for some services. But what we can also do is at the end of this link as well, we can link to a couple of different charities and my websites as well, and your website, I'm sure.
Yeah, great idea. We'll stick some of that stuff in the bio. Great. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks everyone who's been listening as well. If you resonate with this topic and you'd like to ask any questions in relation to it, do get in contact with any of us, all three of us, as well. Let us know if there's any other topics on this area that you'd like us to cover. But apart from that, take care, everyone, and thank you very much. Thank you for listening to the Masculinity Unmasked podcast. We're so glad you're here. If this episode resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And if you're really feeling the love, we'll be grateful if you could leave us a 5-star rating. It helps more people find the show. Thanks very much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time.